great. So as we wait here for a couple of people to log in, we had, I think, 177 registered for today's broadcast. We're just going to wait, a couple minutes to for the chat to start going, and then going to get into introductions and into our main topics for today. I think, like, we've all seen the headlines recently about all the mass layoffs we're seeing across all these companies. And funny enough, when you dive into these numbers, and this is kind of something I've been doing lately, is seeing that even though there is a lot of layoffs, the numbers, the jobs are not entirely disappearing as we think. I think over 30,000 let go at Oracle. A majority of those were then either offshored or brought back as consultants. So your W-2 job may be gone, but now you're back as a 1099, right? So I think the fears of AI eliminating jobs is not completely accurate. There's a lot of things going on right now in the market, right? And so I think for people that are affected by this, today's, I think, hour should really help them, because we're really going to get into, navigating your next job or navigating your severance, and how do you negotiate through all these terrible things that are happening all around and maybe make some opportunities out of it, right?
Say, John, before we, sorry,
Go
Dr.
ahead,
Greg,
Laurie. No,
I was
go
just
ahead,
going to say that it's also a lot about mindset. So, we can talk about how terrible the market is. We can talk about all the layoffs, or we can actually do something about it that is going to work for us versus get us in a spiral. So hopefully this will also help people to figure out what they can own and what they can take control of. And that's only two things: how you show up and how you treat others, and the actions that you take to move you forward, because staying stuck is not probably the best option. So I don't know if we have too much time to talk about mindset, but I think it's a good place to start.
If you listen to social media, I mean, you can go into a complete spiral, right? It's all negative, all outrageous all the time. And we're all kind of get sucked into that loop sometimes when you see reel after reel of terrible things.
Yeah, well, that you have to stop, and you have to learn how to stop. I just helped a woman get a $500,000 sign-on bonus. So there are amazing opportunities out there. Tons of them. We just have to find them, and we have to get you out there networking.
And one of the things I was about to say a moment ago is, number one, we should always be positioning ourselves for whatever may come our way, such that we're prepared to address it when it happens. And to add to the mindset perspective, the way you think becomes the way you are and the way you interact in life itself. And thus, if you have the mindset that says, I can handle this, okay, but you don't know what's coming. Well, I have an expectation as to what is coming. You've already adopted the positioning within yourself to address what is coming, which will put you much further ahead than if you went, AI, I hate it. It's going to kill more job opportunities for me. I don't know how I'm going to advance. Listen to yourself and stop talking. Infuse yourself with a can-do attitude instead, and that will allow you to possess the mindset of a I can do this type of individual.
Well, that sounds good, and that's a good start off to get right into our introductions. So, in no particular order, just want to introduce our panel today that we put together for you, the viewer. First, Carolyn Shaw, founder of The Salary Bump, empowering professionals to own their worth, navigate career transitions, and secure the pay they deserve. As a former chief people officer with extensive HR experience, Carolyn has helped countless individuals articulate their value, negotiate effectively, and achieve transformative career growth. Her approach blends strategy, authenticity, and actionable tools that create win-win outcomes in both salary negotiations and career advancement. Through her programs, she inspires to take the driver's seat in your career, design paths you love, and unlock your full potential. Also here is Dr. Greg Williams, Harvard-trained, Forbes-cited, top 50 corporation negotiator with a wealth of 30-plus years of negotiation and reading body language experience. Known as the master negotiator and the body language expert, he's an accomplished author, speaker, trainer, and recognized worldwide thought leader on negotiation, reading body language, and has written seven books on those topics. Greg's motto is, "You're always negotiating." And finally, Gina Riley, career transition coach and author of Qualified Isn't Enough. Her new book, I definitely recommend you pick one up. The creator of the Career Velocity System, which empowers executives to position themselves as a candidate of choice, a former Fortune 50 HR leader, and executive search consultant for Talents Group. She has led CEO, COO, and CFO searches, trains hundreds in talent selection, and guided leaders in C-suite and board roles across industries. A recognized thought leader, Gina has written 25 plus Forbes Council articles and is a LinkedIn top voice, speaker skills, academy coach, and two-time Disrupt HR speaker. Visit GinaRileyConsulting.com to find a curated Spotify list with all of her appearances. And we thank everybody today for joining us. So our theme today, it's spring Q2, let's say, and we said spring into action. And I think what Carrie Lynn sort of mentioned too is, our mindset is about, and Greg said this as well, having that can-do attitude. So we're here to spring into action for those that have had a job search since, let's say, last summer, and you're like, it's been going on for almost a year. What am I going to do? How do I find my next job? How do I keep the proper mindset to move forward when there's a lot of negativity in the news and, as we said, social media as well? So we're going to talk a little bit today about, let's say, mindset. We're going to talk about once you do find that opportunity, how do you negotiate your package? Because right now it is an employer's market, or so they say. And also, if you are affected by layoffs, how do you negotiate a severance? And how do you pre-negotiate your severance well in advance if you think that may happen to you? So we're going to touch on a lot of these topics. We'll see what we can get through in an hour. If you do have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat and we will get to them, I promise, before the end of the time. So to start off, and just to get the conversation going, it is an employer's market from, let's say, from our executive search mindset. Our view is, the clients have a bit more leverage right now because there's a lot of unemployed. The market is a bit soft. And in some sectors, you've seen a lot of layoffs. And so people are already coming to me saying, if I'm going to go in for this offer, for this interview, I think I want to go on a little lower on salary. They're kind of pre-negotiating against themselves, and they're saying, I don't want to go too pricey because I don't want to price myself out, and I'm worried that someone else will go cheaper and get the role. I really need this job. I've been, they're negotiating from a position of weakness, I would say, with that, but they have to, in a way, from their mentality. That's how they are viewing the market, right? So what would you say to people like that are already telling me, I'll go lower on my salary band, I'll take 175 instead of 200? What do we tell them?
The question I'd ask is, why? Seriously, why? Why? And the reason I would pose that question is because you spoke about the mindset that individual already has. And you said something that's very important to take note of. Never negotiate against yourself. If you have value and as a result of an interview being scheduled, someone has already perceived that you have value, don't lower your expectations by lowering their perceived value of you even before you get in front of them. To do so otherwise is to put yourself at a disadvantage. So I'd ask, why do you have that mindset? What do you feel as though is missing in the skill set that you have that would make you be perceived as being more valuable? And focus on that. If they're interviewing you, they sense value, find out how you can enhance that value. And even in a soft market, I still say, be willing to be the exception by rising above what the normal rate might be, just from a negotiation perspective. So you have fallback room, and we can talk about how you would fall back later on, but have that mindset of a winner walking into that environment and let it show through the body language that you exhibit also.
I would add two things. One, it starts with your relationship to money, and they're already bringing forward limiting beliefs around money and limiting beliefs around a market that they don't know, whether it's soft, hard, we don't know. We're just making assumptions based on doom scrolling or based on, articles that we're reading. So I always get grounded first to their relationship to money. Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is it fear? Why, to your point, Dr. Greg, are you saying this? And let's unpack that. And then let's actually bring it back to data. So what is the market data for this function? You can get that information yourself. You can go to ChatGPT. I think Salary Navigator is a link. You can drop in your resume. You can drop in the job description, and you can get grounded to the market data. We have access to this data today, at least to get you grounded. And so I would start there. And then I would say, focus back on what you can control. And that is practice. And that is prepare, and that is learn how to tell your story in a way that will drop very clearly what your impact is. Gina can talk about this in such a beautiful way, but what did you do? How did you do it? What was the impact? And focus on those things, prepping you for the interview so that you are a standout, so that you are then, wow, this person is amazing. We can't afford not to pay at the highest level. We'll get into, Dr. Greg and I am sure, about how to answer the question when asked what your salary expectations are. That's where people make a lot of mistakes, and then they back themselves into a corner, and then they start negotiating against themselves and they're already backed into a corner. But focus on what you can control. Prep, build your storytelling muscle, and be able to answer these questions. Practice them in the mirror, record yourself, Zoom record yourself, practice, practice, practice.
That kind of brings up another sort of side topic when we're talking, you're talking about have your well, I'll bring up a term Gina uses, unique value proposition. You're going to go into the interview, you need to have that UVP down solid. Yeah. So, and also the confidence in how you're speaking. I think, I'm not sure the percentage, but I did read somewhere they said what you say is not as important as how you say it and your body language when you say it and your tone of voice and the confidence behind it, right? So I think we see this a lot with some of our candidates that have been looking for 6 to 12 months for a job. It starts to wear down on them, on their confidence. Yeah. They feel like they're not as valuable anymore. They're not as wanted. Before I never had to look for a job, right? Or I haven't interviewed in 10 years, and now I'm looking. It starts to grade down. And so what would you say to people that are starting to feel a little bit hopeless with this and sort of getting into despair because it's not, financially for them, not everyone has the savings to wait indefinitely, right? So it becomes really difficult.
I would just say, it would be the first step I would take is to actually prepare and have a runway. People should have a 12-month runway. If they don't right now, understood. But as you go forward, because you don't ever want to be in that position where it's a desperation situation that you're accepting something that's not the right fit. Gina, I don't know if you wanted to say something about the practice and the preparation, but I will say one thing before that, and that is a lot of people, the reason why they're not finding jobs is because they're just looking online to see what jobs are open versus networking. And only 20% of jobs are found that way. 80% of jobs are found via networking, and it's a muscle most people don't love to learn how to build, but networking is how you find your next job. And that is not knock, 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 I need a job. That is strategically networking in a modern way that is leading them to coffee and finding a creative way. Like, Dr. Greg, you seem cool. Body language expert? Never heard of that. I'd love to learn more. These are the kinds of ways that you lead people to coffee that then open doors. That is how you're going to find your next job. Unfortunately, it's not like it used to be.
And I'll let Gina chime in first, and then I'll comment.
So what we have here is a combination between telling the right stories so that you become the undeniable candidate of choice, the standout candidate that company is salivating over, and they want to make you that offer. And that comes down to your storytelling and whether or not you're convincing enough. And being convincing relates to your presence. And John, we've talked about this before in past sessions here, which executive presence or professional presence, there's science behind it. So the way we show up and how we appear, the way that we communicate, and the gravitas that we showcase are the things that help our future decision makers feel confident that we are the right choice. So the first front end of the work of all of this job search strategy process is coming down to your top relevant, high impact stories. Why do you do what you do? How do you do it? And how do you move the needle for companies? And then even more importantly is once you're grounded, what are the problems those companies are trying to solve? You need to be the unique solutions provider. You are a business solution. And then that threads to what we're here with KL and Dr. Greg, which is what are you worth when you do that? And so these are very important building blocks before you network. And back to what Carrie Lynn said, with networking, you've got to be doing it. You got to go jump into the deep end of the pool and go for it. And if you don't have your stories locked down and you don't understand how to talk about yourself, I would wait on the networking until you're ready. Because what happens is you'll go out into your ecosystem and you'll be starting with your friendlies, the people who already know, like, and trust you. But if you can't tell them what you're looking for and why you do what you do best, they can't refer you. And what they will do is they will politely nod and smile and wish you good luck. And they will never do anything on the back end because they really don't get you. So there's a lot of work to be done on the front end before we get to the salary negotiation. So back to you.
And now I want to pick up on the storytelling aspect of that when you're actually, before you get to the interview process. Number one, it goes without saying that you should do all kinds of research up one side, down the next with the entity with whom you'll be negotiating, but to the degree that you can tap into what their personal goals are, in addition to the corporation's goals, you tell your story that fits that narrative, how you can add that value. Your unique selling proposition also becomes the value add that you bring to that environment. Now, here's something else about body language. When you exhibit a form of body language, try to use some form of mirroring per the person with whom you are actually interviewing with. And I say that to say, in some situations, you'll have individuals that are the alpha types, and they'll display it by, okay, come in, please. Yes, you can have a seat. Notice how abrupt they may be or how directing they may be. With that type of individual, you may not want to display the type of gestures that say, I'll challenge you. Instead, you want to have somewhat of a confident body language positioning such that you have your shoulders back, as an example. You have your chin up, which says, yes, I can engage with you. And at the same time, this is psychologically subliminal. Lower your eye gaze just a little bit lower than theirs are, such that you are slightly at a different eye level language. They might not even register that at a conscious level, but subconsciously, it will say, you mirroring their actions. And then at the same time, I'm not going to be a threat and I'm a lot like you. So those are little subliminal things that you can also do to enhance the probability of landing the job that you are seeking. And remember, do not in any way, shape, or form, especially from a nonverbal perspective, lower the perceived value that they already have of you. And last, I'll say on this topic, use the verbiage that they use. If they say, well, we're looking for someone to help the department expand its growth by 30% within the next quarter, you can say something along the lines of, I know I can add value to the growth expansion that you're seeking over the next quarter, as opposed to, yeah, I can help you guys with that or something. That's an extreme case, but those are the suggestions I would offer.
You know what's interesting, John? You asked the question more around salary and whether or not I'm asking for the right amount. And none of us, we didn't really talk about that, because you won't even get to that part of the conversation if you didn't get this front end right. I want to go back even one more step, and that is you only have a few seconds to make a really great impression. As a former CHRO, I interviewed thousands of people, thousands, and most of them were snooze fests because they did not find a way to pull me in from the very beginning. So before we get to the impact stories, before we get to my unique value proposition and how I can help you grow, I need to be able to answer, who am I? What are my gifts? What do I love? How do I want to impact the world? How can I or have I? And actually look at what you really want. Because a lot of people are applying for jobs that they don't even actually want. And that then shows up, and no wonder they're not getting them. So the discovery phase is actually the phase that my clients and I spend a bigger proportion of our time in really unpacking and understanding what that is, because many of them are going through the motions and have gone through their life. I had clients like, I'm an accountant for 25 years. I hate accounting. My parents were accounting. I was told I needed to go to accounting, so therefore I'm now an accountant. And it's like, get me out of here, KL. So we're like unpacking 25 years of this unknown, and some of us have fallen into things that we never actually really consciously chose. We just sort of fell into, and then we're going through the motions. So I would even take that step back, and then you can bring in your impact stories, and it becomes different in terms of the level of confidence and the level of how you're articulating, because you have greater clarity.
So I'm definitely hearing the preparation needed. We need to know our salary bands. We need to know the market. We need to know their company. We need to ideally know a little bit about who we're going to be meeting with, and what, if we can find any kind of information about what kind of person they are, that would be great as well, right? So all that is
we need
prep.
to know ourselves.
Know thyself, right? So prep is a big part. And then, for those that are listening, say, okay, I've done the prep, or I will be doing the prep, or I'm going to go read Gina's book and I'll think about it, right? They're going to do all that. But for people that want, they're interviewing next week, let's give them some advice as well, because some people they've done all the prep and now they're ready to go. How do you go about it in this environment? Because regardless of what we say, there's still probably a little bug in their ear, little birdie that's chirping saying, don't ask for top dollar because you really need this job. It's been 9 months. Just get the job. just get the job. There's that voice in
Yeah.
their head. So what do we tell them? They're going in for an interview and they're going to be negotiating. This is the final interview. What advice would you say in terms of negotiation? How do you go about that?
Two things: you'd never
My
give a number.
tagline is,
Oh,
you're
sorry, Craig.
always, oh, no, go ahead, Kale.
You sure? I would never give a number. So you said, what's the number? Never a number. We always talk in ranges. The first question they're going to get asked is, what are your salary expectations? They have to have done their homework. Obviously, there's a budgeted range depending on what state you're in that's listed on the job description. I would go back and say, I see there was a budgeted range. Is that accurate? Is that correct? Great. Talk to me about the total comp package beyond salary, because we're not only talking about salary. So try not to even answer that question. Try to put it back to the recruiter or the company to say, is that the budgeted range? Talk to me about the whole package. Let's get grounded there. And then if the final offer comes in, obviously that's different. But if you get backed into a corner and you have to give a range, you always want to give a range that you feel good about, that is market tested, that you've done your homework. And the low end of the range that you give, I always say, should be the number that you'd be happy to walk away with. Do not give a number that's lower than that. Give a range also that's high enough so that you've got some room to play. I like to go mid to high end as opposed to low, so that you're grounding yourself to a positive place that you can actually have a deeper conversation. But whenever you answer it, you always have to talk to me about the overarching comp package, because the bonus could be much higher than you were used to. The bonus could be much lower than you were used to. The healthcare costs could be significantly more. There could be no equity and you're used to equity, or your old equity wasn't worth anything and this equity is worth a lot. So there's so many factors to a comp package. You really need to understand that before you answer it.
Now, to that point, exactly, know what your variables are. Know where there is other value in a package offering that may not necessarily just lie in the initial compensation that you'll receive. Here's something else also. Understand what the other entity, the hiring manager or whomever you're interviewing with, can and is willing to give away. Well, how do you find that out? You do it through questioning. And to the point of questioning, the person in a negotiation and or an interview that's leading or answering questions, I should say that's asking questions, is the person that's controlling the flow of that particular session. And thus, if someone asks you what's the range or whatever terminology they use to actually seek information from you, cite the fact that you're within range and then throw a question right back at them. And what do you think about me being within the range? And they can say, well, I don't know what the range is. They can give you anything. But the thing is, when they start giving you more insight, they're going to give you more insight about their thought process, which allows you to reposition yourself at that particular moment in time. Tie it right back into the story also. How would you perceive me adding value to this situation? Well, I see you doing X, Y, Z, such and such, and so on, so forth. And again, the compensation is within the range for that, even slightly higher. What do you think about that? So you're testing as you're also positioning yourself constantly throughout the interview. And at the same time, you're not necessarily giving away inside information, meaning what you're really willing to settle for while you're doing so. It's constantly a game of position, reposition, listening to terminology, mirroring the terminology, and making sure that you are aligned. You can notice some of the body language gestures that are also emitted while you're actually going through those iterations. You actually say something along the lines of the investment to bring me in. Notice I didn't say my salary or anything of that nature. You're framing the mindset of that individual right there. The investment to bring me in is within the normal range that is customary for this position. And the other individual says, well, that sounds good to me. Now, for those of you that may just be listening to this as opposed to observing what I just did with my body language, I said something about, yes, that may be of value or whatever be the case, but I leaned away from the words at the same time. Follow the body language in that case, because those sentiments, the words that were spoken, do not necessarily match up with the mindset that was displaying those words. And it would behoove you at that time to delve a little deeper. Tell me more would be a question that you might pose.
It's pretty interesting with the body language. I mean, it's often we're doing a lot of Zoom interviews now, so you're not able to see people fidgeting and their legs kicking under the table, or their hands if they're wringing their hands or playing with a pen or something. So it's a bit harder to do that, but I get the idea of, seeing how what they're saying may not mirror what their body is saying to you. So what do you look for in terms of like positive affirmations that they're willing to spend more money? What would you be looking for? That they're smiling and moving closer? I'm not really sure what to be looking for in those cases.
Okay, real fast then.
Yeah.
A normal eye blinking rate is between 15 and 20 times a minute. Suppose someone starts to blink a little more rapidly. That shows a degree of excitement. You're talking about smiles. Suppose that individual is not one that normally smiles a lot. If by chance you feel it appropriate, and I do mean if you feel it appropriate, try to tell something to get the person to change their demeanor. Observe, even when you're on a Zoom link, the number of times someone swallows. That's a sign that tension may be forming within that individual, or there may be some form of allergies they're experiencing. But those are the little things that you want to note. And you can literally ask to display empathy. Is everything okay? Notice the tonality at which I used to recite those words, that question. Is everything okay? So understand how you can still control an environment through the pace that you use, the tonality, and also how you can display warmth as you're speaking to someone. I oftentimes tell people, talk to the tune that people can dance to. Anyway, there's just a few thoughts.
That makes
I
sense.
have an additional thing that could be also helpful from an HR perspective. The amount of offers that I gave over the years, when the leader chooses Gina for this role, you better believe that that leader is saying, KL, you do whatever it takes to close Gina. Gina is our person. Close her. Do it. I know as the HR person what I have, what flexibility I have, what play I have, and if I need to be able to go back to finance or go back to the leader because we need to go out above and beyond that based on how good Gina is. When they've already decided to make you the offer, you are the chosen one. They want you. So the fact that we negotiate against ourselves after they've chosen us is, when you think about it in those words, it's absurd, right? We would never, why would we do that? Again, your relationship to money and fear, but just know that the leader is doing whatever, you do whatever it takes. And statistically, I forget what study, I think a fortune.com study says that when you negotiate 87% of the time, the answer is yes. So it's obviously also how you negotiate. Dr. Greg just gave us some good examples, but the answer is yes, 87%, right? Even if it's not on salary, then it's on bonus, then it's on equity, then it's on car, insurance, gas, then it's on executive coaching, then it's on other things that you care about, my chief membership, whatever it is that you care about and you know what's important to you, you get to have that conversation and co-create something that really works for everyone.
Real fast. Did you notice something as KL was speaking, as she touched her heart or near her heart, as she said, what's really important to you? Those are little signs that you can observe from a nonverbal perspective to look at how both the gesture and the verbiage are actually aligned. And when you see a mismatch, suppose instead she had said, when the gesture or when it's available to you or when it's meaningful to me or something, and she's moving her hand away from herself, therein lies in and of itself an incongruence that you can pick up on to understand more of the mindset. There's a lot more sincerity when a person says, this is important to me. Hand movements will a lot of times give a lot of insight into what someone is thinking. And it is extremely difficult to speak without giving some form of hand gestures. For those of you at home or wherever you are that are actually watching this or listening to it, for 2 or 3 minutes, just try talking and not moving your hands. You'll find out how difficult it can actually be. And thus, hand gestures are conveying a lot of information. And again, Gina, chime in, please.
Yes. I will say I'm the queen of hand gestures, and I recognize how important they are. I think these are such interesting points because I think the discussion for the people listening today with you two amazing experts is there are nuances to the negotiation that go far beyond have you researched what the market value is. It's prioritizing what's important to you, getting the quick wins when you're having the conversation, and then focusing on having a conversation that matters to them as much as it matters to you. back to what KL said, they want you as an executive search consultant after going through months and months of a search, and you've got your number one candidate. To let them go is very expensive. So to go to number two might be a possibility, a really great possibility. Coming in number two isn't the worst thing in the world. Sometimes you get the offer. But we want to close the first one, and we want to get it right because it costs so much money to go through this process. But you as the candidate, when you get into those negotiations, think about how you're coming across with your facial expressions, with your tone of voice, and as Dr. Greg said, with the way that you're using your hand gestures, and practice it. Practice with another human, practice in front of the mirror, but all of these things can serve you very well if you're thinking about the art of negotiation as being something where you're influencing people through the way you behave, the way that you communicate, and the way that you connect with them.
Gina, you said a couple things that really struck me, and so did you, Dr. Greg. What's fascinating to me is I do this every day, and I also encourage my people to look for red flags and green flags. And in the negotiation, how you show up in that negotiation will say a lot about you and who you are. And don't underestimate if you are in a sales function, customer facing function, vendor facing function, like HR function, anything that is going to be in front of other people that you are negotiating on behalf of the company. They should want to see you negotiate. So the fact that less than 40% of people negotiate, for women, it's less than 30%. If you're not showcasing that in the interview, they can't see how you're going to show up and represent the company. But on the other hand, observing the company. So I have a really interesting quick example to share with you. I had a guy last week who negotiated his new contract. Massive red flags. HR misquoted the equity amount. They quoted him an amount for VP level, and it was a director level. And it was a very big discrepancy, $46,000 versus $180,000.
Wow.
And they quoted him $180,000. He went back, we negotiated, we were going back and forth, and they came back and said, unfortunately, we made a mistake, and they wouldn't honor the mistake. And so, of course, we're going back and forth and determining, do I say yes to this offer or not from his perspective? And my job is to show all the flags and to show how they showed up in that negotiation could make or break the deal for you as well. And what are you saying yes to? And if it's not a hell yes, maybe it's a no. Like really being sure that these indicators and the process of the interview and how quickly they got back to you and the communication, these are all indicators of how decisions are being made inside the organization and whether or not they honor their commitments. So be mindful of that. And another quick story, I know of a CFO that was made. I was on a podcast with an executive recruiter, and she said that the only time she's ever heard of an offer being rescinded was because a woman didn't negotiate. CFO offer $350,000 base plus. 24 hours later, the CEO pulled the offer because she didn't negotiate. He wanted to see how she would have shown up in that. So that's a rare example, of course, but we get to have a beautiful conversation around money. It doesn't have to be ugly, knock down, drag out. I'm a winner, you're a loser. No, it is like, let's walk in making everybody feel really valued and really like this is what a great way to start this new relationship.
I guess
on the negotiation. I'm sorry, John, real fast. If you mind.
Go ahead.
On the negotiation aspect, my tagline is you're always negotiating. And if you by chance go in and accept a lower starting salary thinking, oh, I got the job, remember, you've set the groundwork from which you will be evaluated later. And as far as other offers that you may have gotten, you may not get those along with the salary increases, such that it becomes a compounded situation when you do not negotiate. And when you negotiate with someone, at least leave them with the feeling that they earned whatever it was that you conceded to them. That's all I wanted to say on that, John.
The one thing that drives me bananas is when I have a client who's gotten to the finish line, they have the offer, and they don't even take a beat to really consider it and go back with that first round of positive negotiations. And I think in this environment, it comes back to what we started with, which is that fear and anxiety and, what if they pull the offer and all of that, because of the compounding effect that you just said, Dr. Greg, because there is a ripple effect all for the years to come. So please, take note of what you just heard. Very important.
Well, that's great. And just because due to time, just want to get over to a little bit on the severance side because there's been, thousands and thousands of people who have been let go. You know, whether you're frog marched out of the building with security or if you get an email or a Zoom call, it's you're not going to be able to prepare a lot of times. You may know that it may be coming. So what should you do? This is maybe to Carolyn especially, but what should you do the first 48 hours when they walk you out of the building?
So I'm going to back it up because actually I specialize in proactive exits. It's
Mhm.
a quite a niche. Not a lot of people are doing it, but you smell the writing on the wall, whether it is part of a bigger layoff or whether there's a new boss in town and you and the boss are not quite seeing eye to eye. Maybe you're on a PIP. Maybe you've gotten really challenging feedback. You know this is likely not going to end well. The sooner you get in the driver's seat of having that conversation and proactively establishing what an exit could look like, a transition could look like with a package. Of course, it's unique, it's nuanced. I wouldn't recommend you just walk in and say, "Can I get a package?" Please call Greg or I and we'll walk you through actually how it works. But proactive exits are significant and you have way more negotiating power than you've already been laid off. If you were walked out, of course, every situation is nuanced, whether perhaps there's a discrimination situation, perhaps there's a big storyline here and they need a release from you. So they're going to give you a package. What is the leverage that you have? There's so many nuances that, again, having an expert help you, this is super unique. Every single exit is negotiable. So I'll give you the one that stands out for me the most is I went to a speaking engagement and talked about proactive exits. Mic drop, people's mouths were dropped. They were like, "What? You can do that?" A woman came up to me after and said, she was thinking of bringing me on to help her figure out what was next. And I said, "I have a better idea instead of retiring." And we got $2.3 million as an exit package. And that was a 35-year tenure SVP level. So obviously there was some tenure and some level there, but that package didn't just happen. She smelled the writing on the wall, a new CEO, not quite exactly a fit. And we told this beautiful story and it was a 10-minute conversation with her CEO and $2.3 million. So these are all possible. You don't have to be at that level or that tenure to get a package, but anyone who's thinking of any kind of transition out, always ask. Now, come back to a larger layoff. Let's say there's thousands of people who are laid off. You have less negotiating power. I have to be upfront about that because they can't treat you different than everybody else, right? So if every director level got 3 months, then it's going to be pretty difficult for you to get extra. But there are some nuances. You can ask for cash payout for any kind of transition coaching, LHH, right management. Sometimes that will be part of the package. You could ask for the cash and then come and work with someone like Gina or I on what your next step is. There are other nuances. There's maybe some healthcare extensions. Perhaps you have specific healthcare situation inside your family and, they're human on the other side and they want to help you, right? From an HR perspective, I've had to do this. So they can't treat you too different, but there are opportunities for you to still ask for more. But that's why I say get proactive. If you smell something coming, you're not in that bigger bucket and you have lots of leverage.
Well, there's a nuance too. There's a nuance to that as well, is if you're a senior leader and there's going to be a pocket of you, a group of you, let's say it's an acquisition and you're one of 5 executives on the being bought out side. Yes, you may all get the same package or it may be similar and bumped up from the rest of the people that may be being laid off, but you can also go to bat as a unit to go seek out the kind of services that would benefit you at the executive level that you will not get one of these standard outplacement company services. And back to what Kale just said.
No.
Those of us that we specialize in these things.
I was going to say what both of you just said a moment ago is a mic drop moment. And the only thing I can say is if I smile any wider, my face is going to crack based on what you guys just said. It was that fantastic. And for those of you that are truly listening to this, watching this, oh my goodness gracious, underline, bold, highlight, do whatever you need to do to capture those last 2 statements you heard from both KL and from Gina, because they really are, gold. And it can turn out to be found gold. The leveraging aspect, by all means, there's always some form of leverage that anyone has in any particular situation. Doing it with a group of folks that are getting ready to be laid off, my gosh, that amplifies your power. So take advantage of that. I'm sorry, but I can't add any more than what you just heard at
There's
all.
two other things I want to add. Thank you so much for that. There is everything is negotiable also on an exit, including a non-compete. So think about when you signed your contract, you have a 1-year non-compete. We want to try to get your exit to match whatever non-compete. So if they're going to put you on the bench, well, then they need to pay you for that. And just know on the other side, they want a release from you, which means you can't come back and sue them. They want that from you. So you do have leverage and negotiating power. And 87% of the time, the answer is yes when you negotiate. So always, always, always ask. But we didn't touch on severance as part of your new package. So when I am negotiating new packages, I am always negotiating severance as part of that, to buy you that runway if anything were to happen, if an acquisition happens, if a new leader comes in and they want to bring their team, if they want to just exit you because they don't like your face, whatever the reason is, you have a runway that you have pre-negotiated. And it is not unusual in years past when people would put it on the table as a CHRO. It felt a little unusual because it wasn't so common. Today, it is extremely common, and it is perfectly acceptable for you to ask for it in your new package. So think about that as well.
Huge.
Just to add a little cherry on top there, I think for people, it's important to realize on the executive side, the job search for executive positions is taking over 6 months now. So you have to pre-negotiate all that into your packages that you're getting, because realistically, it's not like the old market. 6 to 9 months is the average. You should consider that when you're making any decision to accept an offer. If it doesn't work out and it's going to take me 9 months to get an equivalent job, and I also have a non-compete, I don't want to screw myself in the future. So let's sort of grab the bull by the horns here and discuss that, because I don't want to have a position where if I leave, I want to leave on good terms, but also have the support to find something else, whether it be outplacement support, a resume writer.
Yeah. One thing I will say, C-suite, 18 to 24 months is the time frame that it's taking, and that's what I negotiate in new packages, is 18 to 24 months. VP level is 12 to 18 months. Director, anywhere between 6 and 12, and we work our way down from there. But all of it should be on the table. The amount of clients that I've also helped place that have then decided to leave or gotten exited, like they come right then back into the ecosystem and they're like, Kale, thank goodness we did that and negotiated that in the beginning.
I always say, when you prior to walking through the door, think about the one you'll walk through when you're exiting, and make sure that door is good enough for whatever you are looking for that leads to the next opportunity that awaits you.
Absolutely.
That's all good stuff. Some other questions maybe we can address too. How do you not come across as confrontational? Because sometimes, depending on who you're talking to, some people may take it that, how dare you ask for more? Like we gave you our best offer or so on. So how do you approach the negotiation aspect without coming across as, greedy, confrontational, a lot of other adjectives people will use maybe? How do you do that from a position of, well, this is, what I'm looking for?
Go, Gina.
I'll start, but I'll leave it to the experts. First of all, treat others the way that you want to be treated. Second, treat the salary negotiation as a conversation. Back to what KL said, treat it as a way, it's another test of how you behave on the job. Because as an executive, you will be negotiating all kinds of things no matter what role you have. And so you're showing how you can advocate for yourself in a positive way. And then I would say, just don't be a jerk. Don't be adversarial. Treat it, these are people you're going to work with. And so you want to behave in such a way that you expect to have an ongoing relationship. And if you can play it back for yourself and think, gosh, I was kind of a jerk during the salary negotiation process and I won, well, what are they going to be feeling when you start on day one? So treat it like a conversation. I'll hand it over.
So your mic drop is don't be a jerk.
One of the things I was going to say was, again, it goes to knowing with whom you might be negotiating with, that person's demeanor, how they normally act in a particular environment. And if they are somewhat strident or if they are somewhat downright dismissive of you, well, I have to interview you. So let's have a conversation. Can you tell me why you have to interview me? Oh, because the thing is, you're asking questions. And did you notice the pausing that I actually engaged in as I was talking? And the reason you're doing that is to slow the pace of what's occurring at that particular point in time to see to what degree they readjust. You can lead someone with your body language and nonverbal cues coupled with how you display your mannerisms. And I'll go back to the example I cited early on, if someone is the alpha type and you can sense they do not wish to be threatened, you can also show them that you can be a junior alpha type, and therefore you're a alpha type in training. And boy, can't you help me, or will you help me train me to become an alpha type? A person thinks, yeah, that's someone I can work with. The thing is, it's about positioning. And you don't want to be too confrontational. Confrontational is something that depends on the environment that you're in. You have to show that you'll stand up for yourself and not cross the line. How can you tell if you're coming close to crossing the line? Someone may lean in while making a statement, even on a Zoom call. They're emphasizing a point that they're stressing at that particular point in time. You can stay there on your end of the camera and or move back ever so slightly. If you move back ever so slightly, you're saying, I'm non-threatening, and I'm just trying to understand you more. So understand the gestures that you are emitting as you are engaging with that individual. And again, if you feel uncomfortable with someone, I'm telling you, it's better to make sure that you and that individual are on the same page by possibly, and I say possibly, just asking, well, is everything okay? Now, that's a generic question that can be answered in all kinds of manners. If the person says, well, why do you say that? And you can actually say, well, I'm sensing that there may be some form of angst occurring. Notice even the tonality in which I asked the question. It's not a threatening question. I'm just trying to understand more about what that individual is experiencing. So the thing is, you can take control without necessarily leading the conversation, while at the same time controlling it.
Like the idea of being curious. Talk to me about how you came up with this offer. I'd love to know your thought process, right? We talked about the range, we talked about the comp package in the beginning of the process. And I actually have a real example. So let me give you this. She got a job, the offer, and it was the lowest end of the range. Let's say it was between 2 and 250. They gave her 200. She was like, talk to me about me being on the lowest end of that range based on my experience and all the great things we talked about. First of all, thank you so much for the offer. Let's start there. Sorry, I should have backed up. And HR said, actually, we downgraded the role while you were in this process. Thank God she asked, because they took her from a C-suite to a VP. They never told her to talk about red flags. It was such a beautiful, she said, Kayla, I'm so grateful that you told me to ask that question. So being curious about how they created, what was it about my interview that put me on the low end of that range? Or in the interview, you could ask, talk to me about what a person at the high end of that range looks like, and then stop
Gather
talking.
information. Yes.
Use
Yes.
silence. Use silence. And it's very awkward. But when you ask a question or you make a statement, you wait for them to walk through that door, because that's when you negotiate against yourself in the moment, because it's awkward and you get anxious. So being curious, showing energy, smiling. We're at the stage where you want me, I want you. This is like phenomenal. Let's make this a win-win conversation, and I'm so looking forward to it. There are ways that you can set the stage. Never should you be confrontational. That's on you to own. If they interpret it as confrontational and you were nothing but gracious, that's on them. That's not your problem. And that's a red flag that perhaps this is not the kind of company you want to work for. So creating an environment where it is conversational, to Gina's point, like we're at the end of the road. I'm so excited. We are going to do great work together. I cannot wait. I'd love to talk now through this. Let's go. Here's some questions. Yeah. It's only confrontational if you make it that way.
There's definitely a sort of amount of emotional control you need through this process. I definitely can see that, right? So, because I know if and this has happened to some of our candidates where they get an offer verbally, like in the interview, will say, oh, well, we can offer you, that you were expecting 200, they offer you 150, and it's like at the very bottom. And the only reason they offered you at the low end is because they're economic buyers. They just want to save money. That's really the only reason. Not has nothing to do with your skill set, anything like that. So how do you approach that economic buyer that is just, the CFO who's trying to balance his budget? It has nothing to do with your skill set. But this is
I
what we
don't
want to
think that
offer.
conversation is different, John. I think it's the same
No.
conversation because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know any of that. All you know is the range we talked about, the market range, what I made before, what my expectations are, and the value that I'm going to bring to your organization. That's all you know. You can make assumptions all day, but I don't know that it's helpful to assume that of course every company is on a budget, but they
Yeah.
also want you
And the way I
and they
would
want to pay for good quality people.
the way I would address that is to go and then use the silence to just fill in that void to find out exactly why that offer was extended. And in getting that information, that whatever is cited for the reasoning of that 150 versus the 200,000, you will gain some additional insight. Now, here's something else also. Never be triggered by something that was unexpected. Let's say you thought they'd give you 200 and instead they offered 100. Okay, don't lose your cool. Again, you want to probe to find out why that particular offer was given to you, how it came about. And you ask probing questions, and then you use silence. I have seen individuals in major international negotiations pose a question and then talk right over the answer that would have been given by posing a second question right in back of it. You can have what's known as stacked
Layering.
evaluation of questions. Yes. And by having those questions that stack value, you can have those questions in the order that you're going to ask them, but you have to make sure that they are aligned with whatever you're getting in the form of information, such that you display the fact that you have more value. So I understand the 150 is what you are offering right now. Just out of curiosity, what can we do to make that 200,000? That's an assumptive question, by the way. The assumption being you can, or we can together, make that to a $200,000 level, as opposed to, well, can you make that a $200,000 level? It's a little small psychological mind shift that you have put into the negotiation at that particular point in time, but understand where they are so you can take them, or at least help them get to where you want to be.
It's a good point. And a lot to think about too, because I think a lot of times people they get emotional, they get anxious because they need the job. There's a lot of that sort of psychological aspect to this, I think, that we often overlook. It's not just how you pose the question, right? It's how are you prepared mentally to go in. So I think when we go back and step back to the preparation piece of this, that if you're well prepared, you're probably more confident. You're less anxious, right? You're more relaxed because I know my numbers, I know the ranges, I know my value, I know my UVP, I know what I'm going to say. And if you go into the interview that way, I think you're setting yourself up for success, right? So
You should also know your
Much
walk
more
away
so.
number and, again, watch for red flags. So if you have to fight and scrape to get to that 200 and it's a knockdown, drag out, look back through the whole process and see, were there any other red flags here that actually make this not something I want to say yes to?
what would be a red flag for you in an
How
interview?
they behave, process of the interview. Did it take 5 months for you to make this decision? How was I treated in the interviews? What was the follow-up process? What was the communication like? Did you prep me? Did you tell me who I was going to meet with next time? What was that experience like? Do I understand the values of the organization, or were you shady about them? Do those values match my values? Was I able to bring my whole self? What did my body tell me in these conversations? My conversations with my new boss, how did that feel? Did that, was it warm? I've seen a lot of situations. I, in early days, said yes to roles that were absolutely the wrong role. And I knew it. My body knew it. I got in, values mismatch, and left, appropriately, whatever the time frame was. But your body knows, And look, if you make a conscious, I always say to my clients, even the ones that say yes to the red flags, whatever you do, it must be a conscious decision. Know what you're saying yes to. Don't complain about it and be a victim once you get inside. If you know what's hitting the fan, you know that was a very big possibility. If it was a conscious choice, because you need to feed your family, I do understand that. But keep your networking going, keep figuring out what your plan B is, keep moving in that direction so that you find the job that is more aligned. Just be very conscious about it.
You know, that goes right back to know your value. And yes, there are times when you may have to subjugate yourself to something that is lower than your expectations in order to really survive. But at the
Yeah.
same time, understand the positioning that you're placing yourself in, why you're doing it. And at the same time, make sure you justify the fact that this is short term. And when you think about it as being short term, start setting futuristic goals that will take you a whole heck of a lot further. I've had individuals that have said, and it goes back to the expectations, triggers, et cetera, going back to that example that you used a moment ago, where you expected 200,000, they offered 150,000. Hypothetically, suppose you go, well, okay, look, I was looking for 200,000, but I'll accept 150. OMG. Oh, did I say 150? I meant to say 130. Oh, 130? Well, yeah, okay, I'll accept. No, I meant to say 100. I mean, think about how you are positioning yourself in all situations that you encounter. If desperation is part of your demeanor, it will come through. And you'll lose credibility as far as the future value that you might have. It's a long-term process. And as I always say, you're always negotiating. Always keep that thought in mind.
No, it's all good advice, and I really appreciate everyone his input today on the panel, in terms of negotiating your severance, negotiating your salary. And it really comes down to, we said mindset, prep, going in with a game plan and knowing what you're getting into. And as you said, right, having your bottom line dollar, what that number would be, right, in all those cases. So wanted to thank everyone for their time today and for joining us on the panel. We could definitely talk about this all day. I know this is not a topic that just ends. Like there's so many scenarios and things we can go into. Just the UVP piece, we've had panels on before. So stay tuned. Every month we'll have another event like this, and really want to thank Dr. Greg, Carolyn, and Gina for joining us today. So thanks a lot, everybody.
And John, before you sign off, I want to thank both KL and Gina for the excellent advice that they also gave. Here's the value
Ditto.
of being on your show. As we give information, we get information, and thus we learn more about that as a result of that information. Thank you all for that.
Ditto. Thank
It's
you.
reinforcing, isn't it?
And we do get to talk about this all day, John. It's so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.